Okay, greetings everyone. Welcome to the Body Keeps the Score reading and study discussion, part two, finishing chapter two and starting up chapter three. Now, uh, bum, bum, bum. Alrighty. Sorry, we're picking up from chapter two, going into chapter three. It's gonna be about a little tiny bit over an hour, but I'm sure our brain computers can handle it. Oh, now you're supposed to record this part, but it's okay. Let me actually stop recording because this is not gonna even be allowed to go on YouTube. Okay, that concludes the audio session of The Body Keeps the Score. That was part two, which finished up chapter two and get started into chapter three. Um, I took a lot of notes. Sure, many of you did the same. Wow, definitely a lot to think about and discuss as well. Um, my first note is just a critique on the medical and industrial complex in general. Just having something in practice like electric shock therapy, just something like that should be an indication of the insanity that we are forced to participate in due to living in a system of white supremacy. It also goes into that Urugu element where we must destroy to heal. Because I remember him saying how he had a really constructive conversation with a woman whom she said perhaps helped her, but nonetheless, she was still going to have to go get the electric shock therapy, which would erase the conversation, thus erasing any like healing effects that that conversation had. So we live in a system where like we definitely cannot and should not trust the medical industrial complex. Um, yeah. Anyone have any thoughts about?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to speak on that.
Go for it.
You know, Big Mel had he was taking shock therapy at one time,
Oh,
and yeah, he was taking shock therapy. You know how he would have his outbreaks, and they would take him, and he would do shock therapy, but he didn't like it. So as I got older and I understood, and as he, he would refuse to go because he knew what it would do, and it didn't help him anyway. So that was just inflicting pain on him, unnecessary pain, because it didn't do anything for him. It was supposed to help level him out and give him it, but it didn't do anything. It looks like to me it made it worse, his attitude or whatever. And I'm quite sure it had to, because that's painful. Can you imagine having these electrodes take to your forehead, and they're giving you these impulses of shock? And yeah, and that was not a good thing. So I stopped taking them because I didn't want him to go through that, because it was unnecessary and it did not help in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I did not know that my grandmother my grandpa was tortured by doctors while they called it therapy. But this is what happens.
Therapy.
Yeah, this is what
Yeah.
happens in a system of white supremacy. While they're I would see that as some sort of sick experiment. I would see that as him being experimented on and them just measuring the effects. But yeah, definitely something to be expected of, and very tragic and horrendous. And I had no I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that, Miss Tracy. Anyone have any notes they'd like to share? We don't have, it's not any particular order where we're going again.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Grandpa either, but it definitely um, makes a lot of things about him more clear. Probably the psychological trauma that he endured at these those white institutions where they were torturing black males. But one of the things I really took away from the book, this chapter, was the comparisons of like humans and animals, psychological approaches to life. I thought that was interesting when he was comparing his patients to dogs. Uh, it's reminding me of Urugu again, that the way white people do research and interact with humans is very, very, I guess, platonic, or incorrect is another way to say it.
Thank you, sir.
Incorrect. Yeah.
Miss Williams, I see you have a hand raised.
Yes, I do. Um, See, I told you I wasn't sure if I'm gonna be able to handle all this. And even listening to this, it takes me into deeper stuff. Okay, I'm gonna just try to talk a little on this. A few years ago, several years ago, I lost my oldest daughter to a tragic shooting in a complex where it was filled with drug activity, right? Unhousing, trying to do the best I can, got 3 children, uh, husband acting crazy, running around, whatever. But anyway, I'm trying to do the best I can in the housing situation and, just trying to do the best I can for my children. But anyway, in the midst of that, my oldest daughter was 14 at the time. She was killed. And the guy who shot her was her former classmate. He didn't mean to kill her. He was trying to shoot at someone else. The bullet ricocheted, killed her. So in the midst of that, losing that daughter, I had a baby daughter who was, they were like a year apart, right? And they were very close. So with that happening to my oldest daughter, the baby daughter she couldn't handle it. She just couldn't. And I can imagine anybody couldn't handle something like that. Losing a sister and y'all were very close. But anyway, when the tragedy first happened, I didn't really know how to deal with her with that because I didn't know what effect it was. But later, I started realizing she just began to kind of act up a little bit, and she was having problems in schools. And by her already being in a semi-special class, um, they were suggesting, well, maybe she might need to be hospitalized to deal with the trauma from that, right? So me not knowing any better, right? I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe that will help her. Come to find out, that's not the best thing I should have done. But because we're so uneducated in the fields of mental health as non-white people, that we'll do things without really realizing what we're actually putting our children through. And it's more trauma, but we don't know it. She was in 2 different hospitals, right? At 2 different times. But I remember one time, which was the last time she was in one, is that she, the hospital was, the little place was close to my home, so I would go visit her. Because after a while, you only can visit at certain times. So I would go visit her. Then I would let her come home with me for the weekend, and then I would take her back. So this particular time, when I went to get her, she started talking to me in another voice, and I looked at her. So we were walking, right, and I looked at her. I say, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm so and so, so and so." So it was like she took on another personality of another child. And I'm looking at her like, what the hell is going on here? Because I know this is not my child. I'm telling you what is happening. And she began talking that little voice of this other child, right? And I looked at her, and me not knowing mental health and what the proper thing that I should have done, I looked at her and I said, "Look, I don't know who you are, little girl, but I'm not your mother." And I laugh at it now, but I'm thinking that's probably not the right thing I should have told her. But because I didn't know, I figured, well, let me say this and see if this shock out of that nonsense she was doing. And come to find out, I think she had been influenced by the other people who were in the facility, because during the time she was there, she started cutting, right? I don't know if any of you understand what cutting is. It's where um, typical white girls do this. I ain't saying no black girls don't, but beauty is white girls who practice that, where they literally take some type of instrument and cut on their arms or legs or something, right? So I was asking her, well, why are you doing that? She said, well, the other girls were doing it. I'm thinking, because the other girls. So long story short, she ended up leaving that facility. But I noticed that when you allow these people when you put your children in these facilities, and you're assuming that they're going to take good care of your children. They are hospitals, they are doctors. You're taught to believe that. And then I'm realizing I might have did more harm than good without even knowing it, right? That drug Seroquel was one of the drugs that they gave her. And she had she had outpatient treatment or whatever, and she still was in school, and they eventually outsourced her to where she was able to go back into the regular classroom, but she was still taking the drug. So off and on for years after that, I noticed my daughter, she just was not the same, right? And I attribute it to the drug itself. So by the time I remarried, my husband had very good insurance. So he says, well, why don't we try to see if we can help her again? Maybe she's more ready to handle being helped. So we asked her about it, and she says, no, I don't want it. And I understand now what happens in those places, that why she probably didn't want it, but I didn't know then. I'm just thinking she just refused to get better. But then I realized her running away back and forth like that, going to CPS custody, not because she didn't have a home, not because she wasn't loved, but she had got into that lifestyle. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. I'm going to still attribute it to the drug from the racist white supremacists gave her. And it got so to the point that she kept doing that till finally they would take me to court with her, saying like maybe I was the unfit parent. It wasn't that. It's just she had just got to the rebellious stage. I'm going to do what I want, and you're not going to stop me. So the courts finally decided we're not going to keep taking your mother to court, if though she's the problem. You're the problem because you're the one keep running away. So you can't go to any more facilities. And that's how she stopped going to the CPS places, right? But even as she became an adult, the idea of trying to see what she wants some help, that's still something she wanted to do. So I said all that to say this, that as parents, we might have to just do more research on putting our children in these facilities and assuming they're taking good care of our children, because we don't really know what they are doing to our children. We have no clue. And that could be a part of where they're dealing with all this mental trauma, what they have inflicted on them without us knowing if we were putting them in good care. So I just wanted to say that if any parents listening, think about that, because I'm not saying the whole medical field is wrong. I'm just saying we have people in it who do not have our children's best interests at heart, especially non-white children. They do not. And this was a female, this was not a male. But it just goes to show you that if they can find any way to eliminate or take the mental state of our children to where they won't be productive adults, they will do that even as a young age. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Williams. Very
Oh, 5, you're muted. Bill can't hear you.
Oh, 5C6, your audio is not coming. Oh yeah. Does anyone want to share? Carice, Ash, someone we haven't heard from.
I just want let me comment on what Ms. Williams said. I don't know what's going on with my mic, but thank you so much for sharing that, Ms. Williams. A very, very profound and tragic experience. But I do appreciate you sharing that, and I do hope that those who are listening, whether through whether in this meeting or in the YouTube, will just really take from your story and just to understand what kind of world we're living in, which is not one that cares about children, especially non-white Black children. And what you said reminds me of Neely Fuller, how in a system of white supremacy, living in concentration camps known as ghettos, hoods, it's very, very possible that if a Black person is going to be killed, is very possible that it's going to be someone that they knew. And this is my first time hearing a story where from someone that I know that was the case. Your daughter was killed by a former classmate who was participating in genocidal behavior trained to him by white supremacists to go out and hunt other Black people and kill other Black people. So this is a reality. This is our shared lived reality that we're dealing with, and none of this is ever going to change unless we produce justice on planet Earth. And white people have shown us for about over 1,000 years that they will not be the people to get serious about producing justice. So it's up to us to really get serious about learning what we need to know to do the best that we can to maintain in the system, and also to do the best that we can to produce justice immediately, ASAP, because these tragedies, these mass killings involving non-white people, especially Black people, will never stop unless in effective numbers, non-white people are truly serious about producing justice, guaranteeing no one is allowed to be mistreated, and guaranteeing that those who need help receive constructive help. Thanks for that, sharing that. It really reminds me of the Neely Fuller clip, and it's just goes to show how important it is to have a code, and not only to have a code, but to practice a code from birth. The code needs to be taught from birth, and a lot of this insanity, a lot of these tragedies could be avoided until justice is on planet Earth. But anyone like to share, respond, be my guest?
I'll share. I came in the meeting a little late, so I didn't get to hear much, but just the mental ability of people that have mental issues or that have a disability. I do feel like it's our job to know better because they kind of can't help themselves. And, I said in the book, the people that need the most constructive help deserve the help that they need. I know my sister went to a junior blind school for children, where they can stay at the school that they're at. It's like kind of like college, but they have like a roommate that's disabled as well. And my parents felt like they needed to take her there because of the fact that, they both have to work and they have all these younger children that they have to take care of. So they put her there, she has a disability where she can't physically help herself. We will have to physically help her. So, but when I think I was probably 8 or 9, and she will always come home on the weekends with like mishaps. So meaning like she'll have a busted hip one weekend. So now she's limping, or she had a big scab on the back of her head. So it was like a big bald spot that had a big ass, like a big sore. And we had to wait for it to grow back. And they gave her this medication that made her hair fall out. So every time we would take her to go back, she wouldn't want to go back. And as much as they took care of her and gave her like the material things she needed or wanted, she just wanted to be home with us. And they would keep a diary every day for us to read. But I just felt like she wasn't getting the treatment she need. I felt like they were mistreating her, and we didn't have, well, we had proof in physical form of why is her head busted, or why did she bust her hip, or et cetera, but we never had the physical form of what was going on with her. So eventually they just felt like she was like, she had like issues where she gets angry. She don't have a problem throwing and breaking things. So they just eventually couldn't keep her anymore. And they gave her back to my parents. They basically kicked her out. But I felt like she was more content at home anyway, up until she passed. But people that can't help themselves need the most constructive help that's possible.
Thank you so much for sharing, Carice. And another tragedy. And it's very important to understand that all victims of white supremacy, especially Black people, are very, 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 very traumatized. But we often don't have a space or environment or the knowledge to understand that trauma or discuss it or reflect on it. And this is, I believe this to be intentional. Racist men and racist women, they are aware of our conditions on planet Earth. They are aware that 24/7 we are being attacked, mentally, physically, and spiritually, being attacked to the point where we are consumed with self-hate, animosity, and just a slew of emotions that lead to us perpetuating and continuing our cycles of trauma, cycles of violence. So I do appreciate everyone who is taking who has the bravery to share and discuss their trauma, their experiences. This is definitely not a place to be a great spectator. This is a place to attempt to discuss all that you can, so we all understand what is being done to us due to the system of white supremacy. Because this is not just happening randomly. This is not something that should be happening on planet Earth, and we are often told that this is a part of life. This is supposed to happen to so-called disenfranchised, disadvantaged people. But why are we disenfranchised and disadvantaged? It's because it's been a very sophisticated, orchestrated plan to make us this way. So I do appreciate you, Carice, for sharing your experience, and everyone who is doing so. Definitely not an easy subject to discuss, but I do feel it is necessary. Um, I want to discuss medication because when I went to Berkeley, I was diagnosed with post traumatic stress syndrome, and I experienced talking to white therapists, white female therapists, which was not that constructive for me. But there was one point in my therapy where I was being prescribed Abilify, and many other. I had so many pill bottles at one point where when I made a film, I just used the pill bottles that I got from my therapist for the props. And I don't think the medication helped me at all. And I don't think talking to white therapists helped me out at all, because in order to get help, in order to get the help that I needed truth. I needed to understand where this trauma was coming from. But it's very rare that a white person will tell you, "Oh, your trauma is coming from the system of white supremacy." You know, everything that has happened to you that has been destructive is due to you being born into a system of white supremacy. So I think it's really important to exist in truth, speak truth, and if just reminds me of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, who was a counter-racist psychiatrist, who is the reason why this book club is even in existence. But being on all those medications and being prescribed all that stuff and it not helping me at all just made me think that is it even possible to get better as a black person? Is it even possible to so-called heal or experience less of my post-traumatic stress syndromes? And the answer to that question is yes. I just had to do my own work, and that was in the form of like changing my behavior, working out more, and no longer surrounding myself with destructive people. And I like to share another experience from Berkeley, where just mental health was where mental health was not met, and that led to the death of a person. So I used to have an associate who was a countersexual individual, and this decline in their mental health started, and I had noticed it, but I'm from an area where like people are. This is how people behave. Most people are insane where I come from. So I'm seeing a person behaving in that manner was not shocking, but my brain computer remembered it, and that person would have hallucinations, and we would be watching like certain TV shows, and they would just the way they were responding to it was like they were getting like messages from God when we were just watching cartoons. So this person came to my house one day during some sort of manic episode. And I am not a countersexual, nor do I practice countersexual or anti-sexual behaviors. And this person, I'm sure, was aware of that. But this person comes to my apartment in college, goes into my bathroom and shaves his head completely off. And this he had long hair. And then he comes over to my couch where I'm sitting. He bends over and he says, "Fuck me." And then my brain computer, my antennas immediately went up because I'm so confused and shocked by that this really disturbing request for this male to be bending over in front of me, telling me to fuck him. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Are you okay? And then but I knew he wasn't okay because when he first got to my apartment, it seemed like he was coming into some sort of castle, like the address he was saying was not my address, and it was just really bizarre. So I kicked him out of my apartment, and it seemed like he had called another associate of mine over, but it just happened to be that she was returning to the apartment complex exactly at the time where I was making him leave. So he gets in the car with my associate, and he's telling me to get into the car, and I, of course, was not gonna get into a car with what I perceive to be someone experiencing some sort of psychotic episode. So I walked away from the car. I did not get into the car. I went about experience like reflecting on what the hell is happening. So they drive off to, I believe, to be a former dwelling of his, where he eventually attacks my associate with a knife, um, traumatizing her and brutalizing her. And throughout the course of that, a individual who has been classified as white ends up dead. So that is one example of how unchecked mental health can happen. And also, I would attribute that situation to being in a place like Berkeley, where you're surrounded by white people who are introducing you to psychedelic drugs, who are introducing you to anti-sexual, counter-sexual behavior. It led to a lot of confusion, and it eventually led to my former associate being involved in that situation, and they are now in a mental institution for what I believe to be life. But it just goes to show that if I had any understanding of white supremacy back then, any understanding of mental health, I would have been able to act, behave differently in that situation, and perhaps have prevented loss of life. But in a system of white supremacy, we are trained to be totally helpless and clueless as to what is happening around us. And that is one of the many examples that I've experienced involving trauma and just things that should not be happening, but will continue to happen as long as white supremacy is on planet Earth.
Yeah, I've so many stories to share. one that juxtaposes 0526's story, but I'll share that one for another day. I just want to go back to childhood, and because I went to a school that's known as Wadsworth Elementary, and that school had a really really horrible problem with white supremacist race teachers who are non-black white males and white females who abuse Black children physically, spiritually, and mentally. I have so many horror stories from this school, but I'll share one incident where I was probably in the second grade or the third grade. I'm not really sure. But basically, we had just finished a art assignment, and all the little kids, we're children. You're like, I don't know how old you are when you're in the first grade, but like you're pretty young. I'm not sure the age range. And I'm a child, and I'm in the back of the line waiting to wash our hands because we had just did an art assignment. And then my teacher at the time, her name was Miss Gerns. She was a white female. And I had made a joke in the back of the line amongst the little children, and everyone started laughing. So all these kids are in the back of the line laughing, but she comes to the back of the line, she sees me, the black kid. I'm not sure if there's other black kids in the class. I do know my friend Matthew was a black male, and he's also in the class.
I was there.
Oh, you were there, Chris? Oh, okay. So we have a witness. So she grabs me by the hair and takes me to the sink and starts like drowning me in the sink. And the whole time I'm like thinking, oh wow,
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you,
yeah.
But why didn't you come and tell me this was going on? See, you guys wait. I hear all this stuff that's going on with you guys that happened to you guys when I was supposed to be supervising and watching over you. And every day, when you guys got home,
because I assumed that.
No. I always ask you how was school. I don't care if it was good, bad. When I asked you that question, regardless of what the situation was, me being a parent, I should have known that this was going on, so I could have came up to that school and said something. Now, you stopped me from.
I just imagine.
I know you guys know about my attitude. I probably thought I would go up there, whatever. But I know how to speak to people when it comes to that. If I had to get funky, I could have got funky. But I knew I could have came up there and talked. And some stuff that you guys went through, it could have been stopped and could have been prevented.
But
the reason why some of that stuff was going, because you was not telling me this was going on. So they feel y'all don't have anybody that love you guys or take care of you guys to come up here and stand up and fight for you guys.
I don't think that's it. I didn't tell anybody because I assumed that I wanted her to die, so I assumed that if I told anybody that she would be murdered. So the next day after this incident, this is the absolute next day. She's teaching the class, and then she walks past my desk, and she falls like face first on her nose, and she breaks her nose. And that was the last time we ever saw Miss Gerns. But
she fell on somebody's backpack. She tripped.
Yeah, she was somebody. Yeah, she fell on her nose, and
also it's very important, Miss Tracy, to understand that the system of white supremacy trains us from birth to be totally helpless. So while we, of course, should have told you, we didn't have that awareness to tell you, because I was being abused in first grade, and just the trauma of it. You don't think to tell people sometimes. It's not your fault that it happened. It's racist man and racist woman's fault. No one is to blame here, but the people who practice white supremacy, the people who allow white supremacy to exist on planet Earth, which is white people, racist man, racist woman, and racist child. So the only blame, if we are to blame, is for the white supremacists. But it's very important to understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Therefore, the blame is always placed on racist man and racist woman, never on the victims. And I don't know if Trey was done. I don't know if Cert was done speaking, but I see Miss Williams has a hand. So Cert, if you would like to continue, and Miss Williams.
No, yeah, I wanted to just complete my train of thought. Yeah, I don't blame anyone but Miss Gurns, the devil that was living inside the white female. Um, and I thought about telling my mom, but I did not want her to end up in greater confinement, because if someone told me my child was being abused, I would just kill him. Because that was my mindset. The child, I thought death was very, very acceptable. So like, I'm thinking, I don't really want my mom to have to kill somebody, so I'm not gonna tell her, because we'll probably kill this woman. So that's why I kind of just took it on a chair, and the next day she was punished for it by unknown forces, so karma and whatnot. But yeah, Miss Williams, you can definitely hop in.
Thanks so much for saying that. But I want to say to parents, because I'm one myself, we tell our children, if anything happens that's not right, tell me, tell me. I just want you to know, a lot of times they are not. Sometimes they have been, sometimes they're just ashamed. Sometimes they're afraid because the person who did these things to them may have threatened their life or threatened to kill their whole entire families. We have to understand children are children. They are not adults. They cannot think the way adults think. So as parents, we cannot hold ourselves the blame because the children didn't tell us, or they may decide, oh, I'm grown, I can tell you now. I've had that to happen a couple of times with my children. When they were grown, they told me things. And I'm saying, okay, well, why didn't you tell me this when you were going through this? They couldn't. They couldn't. And does it hurt? It hurts extremely. But we have to put the blame where the blame belongs, on the system of racism, white supremacy. This is what they do to our children without us knowing. So when we don't know what the system is and how it works, then all of this stuff will continue. So I'm just saying, for any parent, if your child decides not to tell you when when they're going through it, and they tell you when they become an adult, when they figure, I can tell you now, try to be understanding, because they were children. And if we go back into our life, many adults now, things happen to us as children too, and we didn't tell nobody. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But we have to remember, in being a child, you're gonna think like a child. You're not gonna think like an adult. Your ability to think rationally or logically about a situation will not be there. So let's make sure we put the blame where it really goes. And I say to any victim of sex abuse, any type of abuse, period, because there are so many abuses that are going on, is that we will, I remember Mr. Williams said, I think in our last broadcast, we were covering this topic, but can we really heal the trauma? No, we cannot. Until this ugly, despicable, horrible system of racism, white supremacy is replaced, eliminated with a system of justice, we will continue to deal with our trauma. So even having to talk about it now, is it painful? Yes, it's painful even for the memory. Now, I heard something in the recording where it said that when they gave him the shock treatment, now they asked him about the trauma that was they experienced, and the people talked about it, if I'm understanding this correctly, that they talked about it. And then after that, they gave them some type of shock treatment where they erased their memory. They're lying. That you ain't erasing nobody's memory. People remember that. They may not remember it right away, but over time, those things are gonna come up because it's trauma and it has not been dealt with. And as long as we have this system in place, we're all gonna continue to know people who are constantly dealing with traumas like this. So let's put the blame where the blame goes. Let's not blame the victim. The children are the victims. They're the ones who endured it and didn't know what to do. They just didn't know. Blame the responsible party, the the victimizer over the whole planet, the system of racism, white supremacy. Blame them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Anyone, Miss Tracy, would you like to, Mr. Williams? I saw your mic.
Yes, I just want to thank Ms. Williams for that because I really need it because I'm really upset and was really hurt behind that because, you know, I just can't believe someone would do that to my child.
Yeah, but on the system of white supremacy,
The twins now was the best, but the twins now was really cool growing up. I mean, they were great. They barely got in any trouble or whatever in the little incidents that they did get in. It wasn't any biggie, you know. So for a teacher or anyone to mistreat or abuse any child, not just mine, but any child growing up, that is so wrong. And I hope that children or anyone that hears this, if you're in school or whatever, tell your parents, tell someone, don't let it continue. Because if you don't tell anyone, no one is able to help you. I understand that we're going through all this racism and everything, but still speak out and tell someone something. Don't go through such things by yourself.
A lot of times, you can expose a child to something at such a young age that they won't know that what's happening to them is incorrect. I heard Dr. Wilson talk about this before. A person can be mistreating a child at such a young age that they won't know that it's incorrect if someone else doesn't come to them and tell them that it's incorrect. They'll think that it's just, something that people do. I mean, the child just got to the planet. They don't know. So when you have things being done to children at, 6 months old, up until they're 5 or 6 years old, they won't know unless somebody doesn't tell them. So it's definitely important, to tell children, to talk about things. A lot of parents don't even want to talk about things with their children. Even when the child is a teenager, they want, I've seen it happen. Personally, I've seen it happen. So, it's very important that, not only the parents of that child, but also older siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever the case may be, to talk to children about.
Sorry, I told you about that, Miss Jenny. Just stand up.
I'm sorry.
She's at work right now. She didn't have her mic muted.
Oh, okay. One of the other things that I wanted to mention, I heard Dr. Wilson say numerous times, is that the general consensus in psychiatry is that Black people can't think deep enough, at deep enough levels, to benefit from therapy. So then chemical therapy is the best kind of therapy for them. So when you listen to things like, what we listened to earlier, the book, the audio book, and the people in this meeting, their actual stories in reference to that, you can see that pattern. You know, and I've heard her say that so many times, and she refused to operate that way, and for that reason she was shunned, she says, by even other Black psychiatrists. You know, that she would actually provide the type of therapy that Black people needed, and not just, you know, prescribe them something and send them home. And even Black psychiatrists refused to, you know, sign on to work that she had performed. Some of her writings, I mean, even before the ISIS papers, you know, she used to talk about things that happened way back then, you know, when she was still in, you know, in clinical psychology, but she, you know, had not yet written the press theory or the ISIS papers. And so it's important to, you know, to kind of understand how the world works. You got to understand that. And that it's business. It's the business of maintaining the system. And white people are going to continue to do it. And we're going to continue to fall victim to it until a substantial number of non-white people can muster up the courage and the strength to replace this system with a better system, preferably a system of justice.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Williams. And I'd like to comment on what Ms. Williams said. And I think you're correct when you say that you really can't forget your traumatic experiences, because despite your memory not being able to recall what has happened, this book is called the Body Keeps the Score for a very particular reason, that trauma lives inside of you, which could possibly be why traumatized people experience this imaginary pain. For example, we remember that part in a book where victims of child abuse can experience random pain in their stomach. Perhaps it's because something has triggered them to remember their traumatic experience of being punched in the stomach by a relative or attempted parent. So very, very important to understand, yes, how the world works and just how far the trauma goes. And I don't subscribe to the thought that Black people are too silly to use their brain computers to help process their trauma. I from reading the ISIS papers and from just understanding how Black people were before becoming dominated by the system of white supremacy, our brain computers are immensely powerful if able to begin some sort of what Neely Fuller calls the deniggerization process, which can only be fully completed once the system of white supremacy is eliminated. But beginning the process can and should enhance our brain computers, and to the point where we maybe don't need so many drugs, chemicals to help with our trauma. Like for myself, I very, very, very traumatized. I've experienced many of incorrect things, but I'm not on any medication, and I don't feel like I need to be. And also, very important to understand from the code that in this system of white supremacy, we are all in some way, shape, or form insane, insane in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the way we think or whether it's us going through life pretending racism is not affecting us 24/7. All these are symptoms of insanity, of symptoms of poor mental health. Yeah, but trauma lives in the body, which is last meeting. When I discussed being in that raid when I was about 13, and in a moment I didn't realize that it was a traumatizing experience. It wasn't until maybe years later where flashing lights and banging sounds would remind me of the raid and the kicking down of the door and the assault rifle with the flashing light aimed at me and me screaming to race soldiers that I'm a kid, not knowing that in a system of white supremacy, a black kid is nothing more than a creature, animal thing worthy of death, never worthy of compassion or anything that is correct. So the body keeps the score. Nothing is ever truly forgotten. And I'll leave. I'll stop there and see if anyone has any more comments, the insight they'd like to share.
I think it's important to mention that even though we can't immediately affect the overall system of racism, white supremacy, we can definitely do substantial amount of work to, improve our brain computer and our thought by channeling our thoughts to be more positive. And what I mean by that is by psychologically reprogramming your own brain and how you think about things, how you think about your life. And this is a really repetitive process, but this is what it takes to interact with your trauma and address your trauma. If you're not trying to go to a therapist or you're not trying to go to counseling, you're gonna have to be the governor and mayor of your own thoughts and what you're thinking about and why you're thinking about what you're thinking about, and really having to really deconstruct how you perceive yourself in reality, because to really address trauma, I think you have to somewhat be logical and a scientist about it. What happened? When did it happen? How did I feel? And then obviously there's the role of forgiveness, forgiving yourself. No one's really at fault here, besides the engineers of racism, white supremacy, the people who are working 24/7, 365 days a year to ensure non-white people are suffering. The more suffering that Black people and non-white people experience, the better the system is. It reminds them of their hierarchy and their superiority. Whenever a Black male is murdered on the news, it reminds them of a defeat, and it gives them their bloodlust, because we totally are totally opposite organisms, white people and non-white people, totally different ways of being. And that needs to be also thought upon when you're thinking about why you experience what you experience. You're dealing with creatures who are inhumane by all standards.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Sarah. I like to comment on the part of the book which discusses the control over patients, which definitely falls into the Yurugu. How white people must control and dominate every situation, no matter how small. Even a conversation must be dominated and controlled by the average racist suspect. So that portion in the book where he is having to force feed the patient. I believe her name was Sylvia, but I could be wrong. But anyway, he has to force feed a patient, and he later discovers that that patient is a rape victim, and then he's able to reflect on if the situation with himself and other doctors having to overpower this woman may have been very similar to her rape. So this system, even when attempting to so-called help people, non-white people, is very destructive and how it does it, and something to be very wary of. This is why I would this is why I freaking think we should do our best, the very best that we can to keep our own health, mental health in order, so we are having to deal with racist men and racist women a lot less, because it's very possible when having to deal with them, our problems could get worse, and or we could be used as some sort of guinea pig in one of the experiments. I'm reminded of what Miss Tracy said earlier about my grandpa being used and having electroshock therapy done on him, and I do believe he's also a former military veteran. I could be incorrect on that, but I do think he is.
No, you're right.
Okay, so yeah, and that's just to show just the greater incorrectness and the greater reality that racist man, racist woman does not care about black people, even if that black person goes out and mistreats other people on behalf of the so-called military, on behalf of the so-called United States of America, we will be given zero compassion in this system. So it's up to us to do the work upon which we're doing right now. Um, yeah. So also, and for I'm reminded of not something that happened to me, but something that I've heard my twin brother said discuss quite frequently about a dentist experience that he has recalled to me a couple of times, and I'm just reminded of the mad scientist Yurugu reality of just a dentist medical field is just very violent, and it reminds me of slavery a lot by the tools that they use to constrain a person's mouth and face, and just the
Hello?
the vile incorrectness of this system is something to be totally serious about, and that's all I have to say for now. I'll leave space for others to comment. This is not a place for great spectators. This will all be on YouTube if you have nothing to share. Um,
So about white people having to dominate even a conversation, like you were talking about before, it's a cumulative effect. So they understand that in order to maintain the system of racism, white supremacy, that it takes thought, speech, and action. They really understand that, whether they can articulate it that way or not. They understand that, and they show you that with their actions. So in a lot of ways, from the strategic aspect alone, counter-racism borrows a lot from how white people run the business of racism, white supremacy. Really, it takes thought, speech, and action. I mean, on a constant basis by many non-white people. You know, and it has that accumulative effect. And white people notice that. They notice anytime a substantial number of non-white people are doing anything, they notice it right off the bat. We don't notice it so much. You know, we don't notice it so much. But they notice it because they understand what it takes to maintain that system. And they understand, because of that, they understand when that system is under threat. I just wanted to say that, that's extremely important to take note of. I can give some examples, but that's for another time, I think.
Well said. Which is why very important for all victims of white supremacy through thought, speech, and action to do all they can to counter this system. And the best way to do that is by sharing truth, understanding racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works. Because this is not something that is isolated just to America, just to South Central. This is a global system affecting every non-white person, Asian, black, white. I mean, not my bad, Asian, brown people, Mexicans, everyone who's not. I'm not even gonna waste my time using the labels white people have created, but everyone who is not white is affected by this system of white supremacy. And the best way to eliminate it is through thought, speech, and action. As long as that action is constructive to eliminate the white supremacy, it should be done every single day, 24/7. I see Ms. Williams has a hand raised. Or is that an old hand raise, Ms. Williams?
No, that's a new hand raise. Sorry. I wanted to say something about the medications that they're giving us to deal with our mental issues. I was, and this was after the thing with my daughter, right? The one that was killed. Sometime after that. Now, I thought I was doing fairly well, but then I realized having something like that happen to a child, 14, it does something to you mentally. You just may not realize it at that time. So later, I started seeking mental help for that, right? And they put me on the drug Prozac. I started taking the drug, and Prozac is higher than the generic, right? So usually they see how you act with the original drug, and then they'll try to decrease it by giving you a generic. I'm I'm not a doctor, but I am a person who have had doctors. I've come to the conclusion that along with these doctors, we have to be our own doctor as well, and not just take everything they say to heart, if though they are the authority over your body, because they are not. They are guessing a lot of the times, and it's through trial and error that you might get some relief and may not. The drug Prozac, I was prescribed, I was taking it, and after a period of time, they switched me to the generic drug. Everybody's system is different. My body rejected the generic the very first time I took it. I was sitting on my balcony, and that drug was telling me to jump. Now, some people say they have that experience with the Prozac, but all I'm saying is that everybody's body is different with the drugs that they are prescribing us. And you have to be careful to pay attention when you're starting any new medication and watch how it's reacting to your body. When I saw what it was doing, the generic, I immediately called my doctor and told her what I was experiencing. She said, stop taking it immediately. There are a lot of drugs you're not supposed to stop taking cold turkey because you can have withdrawals from it. But they had to go through the insurance company because, of course, they didn't want to pay for the higher drug Prozac. They wanted to pay for the generic. But because me reporting to my doctor I had a problem with it and it was causing me suicidal episodes, then they had to switch it. But what I did, I asked my doctor later, I said, well, how long am I going to have to be on this medication? She said, oh, you'll probably be on it for life. I'm thinking, life? I mean, I knew I was dealing with some depression, but for life, right? So what I did, I didn't do it immediately, but I began to figure out a plan of how to help myself, because I wasn't planning on being on nothing for life, not me. But I was trying to figure out how can I do this. So I started decreasing my dosage of what I was taking. I would like, take it, but not the way it was prescribed. And gradually I got off the drug with no withdrawals because I gradually did it. But what was happening, because I was still under that doctor, they steady prescribing medication. I'm steady letting them refill it, but I know I'm not taking it because I know what y'all trying to do. You're trying to make me to be on a drug the rest of my life, when really some drugs are to really be used for a short period of time. But because of the money factor through these pharmacies, they will tend to leave you on drugs longer than you need to be, just so they can keep making money. Don't you ever forget, every time a doctor writes a script, he's getting a kickback from that every time. I'm not saying that our medications are bad. All I'm saying is that you need to monitor what you're taking. And as you monitor it, I began to, like I say, I was able to get off the drug, but when I would go to a psychiatrist, say, how you feeling? That's all they want to know all the time. How you feeling? Because they want to see if that drug works. I was in good mood and everything was just, cool and everything. So she was so impressed. So she says, well, why don't we get you in a group where you can talk to other people and tell them how wonderful this drug is working? I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to get no group. But so I didn't end up, I told her, well, I don't think I want to do that. But anyway, she was just so proud of my so-called progress, but she didn't realize I was not taking the drug and I was doing just fine. So I say that to people to just make sure, as your doctor prescribed medication, you monitor yourself and what that drug is doing to you. I'm not telling everybody to get off the drug because I was able to do it, but I'm just suggesting that when you're dealing with these mental health drugs, their goal is to keep you on life, because as long as you on it, they're going to keep making money. And we have to be better than that when we see what they're trying to do to us. So in my experience, I was able to monitor it enough and realize I was not going to be addicted to this drug all of my life. So it worked fine. So we have to hold the doctors accountable to a certain degree, because when we think that they have our best interests at heart, most of them don't. They have their pockets in heart. That's going to keep them buying those expensive homes, going on those fancy trips, buying those luxury cars, all at our expense. And as non-white people, we have to wake up and realize that we're being played, we're the guinea pigs, and they're going to use us as long as they can with that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. Very well said.
Yeah, I would like to on that.
Go right ahead, Ms. Tracy.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. They had him on a whole bunch of different type of drugs for his mental health or whatever. And I was looking at how I was treating him. So what I did, I took him off everything that they had him on. And he was so much better. He had episodes, but they were
Ms. Tracy, your mic is like cutting in and out, so it's really hard to understand you. Perhaps getting closer to your internet connection or your mic will help. Yeah, it's still really choppy.
Yeah, that's just internet here. I don't know what's going on here.
It's better. You were saying?
Okay, I was just saying that I had took my dad off of all that medication. When you guys seen how y'all probably didn't pay, but I had took him off all that medication. That towards the end, he was doing much better. as you know, he was all right. He wasn't having mental issues like he was when he was on the medication, and it just did. You can see the difference. And most of the time, the drug that they give people for mental isn't really. I guess it will, but at the end, if you on it so long, it does things to your brain. It's a chemical effect to your brain where it's not good. And I'm not one for taking medication anyway. My sons would let you guys know I'm not one of those that, no, I don't do that. I don't believe in this synthetic man-made stuff.
Yeah, as is the African way. I do remember Grandpa improving, not because of I had the knowledge that you took him off of medicine. I just remember him improving throughout the years. Thanks for sharing that. So the psychiatrist, he posed a really really good question, and I believe from my observation of 2021 that I know the answer to this question. But he asked, are traumatized people condemned to just repeat themselves, just to find themselves into the same predicaments? And I believe that is what we're dealing with. I do believe that we are in we are trapped in this cycle where many of us, myself included, for a very long time, just kept running into the same it's just the same problems. And it's because I had not developed the mindset nor I would say knowledge on how can I get myself out of the cycle. And if I could bring a example, if I can find an example that I like to share, I will. But currently, I can only just think of like South Central and just what I experienced there and what I believe to be taking place there. And it's just a celebration of so-called hood culture, and it's a environment where at the same time Black people are killing one another. Large celebrations are created to celebrate, like for example, there's something called Hood Day that I see some of my family members like preparing for and posting about, which is which is some sort of party to celebrate gang culture is the best way I could describe it. And why would a group of people celebrate a culture that has led to so many of their so-called loved ones being killed, destroyed by bullets, and being encaged by white people in greater confinement called prisons? Like, why would this happen? And it's because
Okay, I'm gonna tell you why that happened. We have that day is to commemorate, and we talk about the ones that's not about the things that how things have changed and how some things we've been.
But your mic is doing that thing again. Your mic is doing that thing again. So
I don't know what's going on with this mic.
Sometimes
Can you hear me now?
Hard, a little better. It's a little better. It's a little better. So you were saying?
Okay, like I was saying about the Hood Day. That's where we talk about the ones that's not here and the ones that, we see what's going
on. Your mic is cutting off, but I believe in the system of white supremacy. Black people don't have shouldn't be celebrating anything. Like Black people should not be gathering in large numbers to do anything that is not constructive, unless Hood Day is where Black people are coming together to say, okay, how are we going to stop all this violence? How are we going to stop us from killing one another? I don't see the constructive value in it, and I suspect I would say that yeah, you're just gonna your mic is we cannot.
Because so many
Yeah, Miss Tracy, we cannot hear you. The distortion is too much. We cannot decipher what is trying to be communicated. But if your mic situation improves, please try to retain that thought. But that's just not it's not just isolated to Hood days. It's celebrating even birthdays is a sign of poor mental health, because so much more time and energy could be spent doing more constructive things. So I believe we do have a compulsion to repeat our trauma, whether or not we are realizing this is what we're doing. This could just be how the brain works. It feels comfortable doing what it knows. So if you know nothing but suffering and trauma, that is what I suspect a person will attempt to recreate over and over, even if it takes the place in the form of fun parties, the form of whatever we want to call it. It's just important to know where it's coming from, and and very important to know that this very thing could be helping to support and maintain the system of white supremacy. And he says another good point.
No, those functions that people go through, it could be helping them. It could be stopping them from doing something that had they not been going here, or had they not got a knowledge from someone here. I mean, everyone has a different motive for everything. So you can't say that this is for this and this is for that. It doesn't work. Everyone has their own individuality and their own thoughts and feelings about certain things.
That's
all I'm saying.
That's definitely correct. And I do understand the logic from spaces like that, where a young homie may be able to get knowledge from an older homie, a homie who has perhaps taken the life of another Black person who could tell that little homie that that's not a path they want to go down. So yeah, it can be constructive in that manner, but that's all I have to say in regards to that. And it's not just hood parties; it's all parties. It's most celebrations that non-white people participate in.
Well, I would like to sign on to that.
My dog.
I don't
I see
celebrate
what's going
nothing.
on. My iPad finna die, you guys. I love y'all, and thanks for adding me to the meeting. I gotta go because it's dying.
Okay, no worries. See you next week, hopefully. Thanks for your participation.
Like I was saying, I don't celebrate nothing. So, not with the world in the shape that it's in. There is nothing to celebrate. So I definitely sign on to that.
All right, yeah, we can celebrate. The first party I will attend is celebrating justice on planet Earth, which will be the party hopefully described in Fuller's The Code Book. So yeah, and I believe that the compulsion to repeat our mistakes is driven by what the psychiatrist discusses, which is to I don't know, we become addicted to our trauma, we become addicted to the pain, and that creates a loop, a cycle of self-hate. And because we don't respect ourselves and because we hate ourselves, of course we deserve the suffering that we find ourselves in. And I could be incorrect, but I believe that is what was being communicated in the book, and I do believe there's huge evidence for that to be the case. Why? How? I have no other way to describe um, how my victim unit operates, nor how the majority of non-white people operate on planet Earth. Um, and I think the portion about the amygdala is really, really important because what I understand is that the amygdala is how your mind and body perceives threats. And I'm from a place where like just walking next to another black male, tension is created because our environment is just so hostile. So if and I'm just thinking, if this amygdala is constantly responding to perceived threats, and we've been conditioned and trained to see blackness as a threat, that of course is creating a lot of psychological stress on the mind and body, therefore creating more health problems, like I would say like diabetes, stroke. I know my uncle was very was attacked constantly by his sister, and eventually he had a stroke. And I'm certain that that is because of the his amygdala being just totally destroyed, his serotonin levels in his brain being totally absent, and therefore leaving him susceptible to a stroke and many other health issues that arose during that situation. So, um, yeah, me, I have a one associate who would comment on how black, how when we're walking down the streets, and we see other black males, like he makes an effort to just like attempt to say hi or nod because he wants to eliminate just that entire interaction when black males are crossing paths with each other. There's some sort of hostilities. There's this tension, and that is, of course, a symptom of white supremacy that needs to be eliminated. The only threat, actually, um, non-whites and white people are very are dangerous due to our programming and training, but still it's very important to understand where this threat came from, and is a racist man and racist woman. And I would imagine that the serotonin levels of all non-white people is pretty low due to the constant attack of living in this system. So do things that we should do things that are known to improve our serotonin levels, like exercising, walking in nature, listening to nature, getting some sunlight, and if one has the will and bravery to talk talk about our experiences, talk about our problems, not to complain about it, but just to report to the universe what we've lived and what we've survived, and perhaps that may also alleviate um, a lot of the damaging effects of white supremacy, and also help to improve our serotonin levels. And another part that I heard from the audio that really resonated with me was we are enslaved, traumatized people are enslaved by their emotions, our emotions. And just reminds me of the current state of non-white people who have been trained to operate on emotions and not logic, which is why I think I heard Dr. Senku mention yesterday how a lot of people, he suspects a lot of people in greater confinement may be there because of anger. Um, Again, their inability to control their emotions, operating on emotions and not logic and not thinking clearly. So we have been trained to operate on emotions, and these emotions literally can lead to us being enslaved in a place known as greater confinement, also known as prisons. So, huge reason to become better at maintaining our emotions, controlling our emotions, and understanding that our emotions are very important. But they are to be used constructively, just like everything in the universe is to be used constructively. It's not constructive to be totally ruled by your emotions 24/7, and unfortunately, that is the case for a lot of non-white people. I'm also reminded of the chapter in the ISIS papers with just the child parent reality that if you are raised by a child parent, your child parent is mentally the age that they were when they had you. So, for example, if I have a child, if I'm at 16, I'm going to mentally stay a 16-year-old until I no longer have to raise that child. So, just the situation that we're living in is very, very incorrect, and what seemed like an unbeatable situation, an unescapable situation. But it's very important to understand that justice can be placed on planet Earth, because I was once a very vile, drastically retarded monster, and I suspect a lot of non-white people are, and but they have. It's very possible to come out of it just by opening up a few books, listening to a few lectures, and really answering the calling to produce justice. Because we're not on this planet to be slaves, not on this planet to be prisoners of war, not on this planet to be the laughing stock of white people, to be their guinea pigs, to be their life force. I don't think we came to this planet to be these things. But nothing will change unless we get an understanding of what's happening on planet Earth and to counter it. How can we counter the child parent reality? Like what Dr. Francis Wilson says, don't teach or have children believe that they can raise children if they're not understanding racial white supremacy, and if they're not at least at the age of 30 to 35. Um, and also the child parent reality can goes back to being enslaved by emotions, because children often have a hard time controlling their emotions, because that's to be expected, especially in a system where we don't train and teach our children how to control their emotions constructively. So we have like just a bunch of adults who behave like children because white supremacy makes all non-white people children. So everything is connected, everything relates to the system of white supremacy. And if you understand that, if you understand white supremacy, everything kind of just falls into place as to what's happening and why from my experience. Um, do anyone like to share any more notes, comments?
Um, well, what do you tell someone that is constantly getting themselves into a pattern, but you know that they can get themselves out of it, if that makes sense? Like, how do they not feel so stuck if they're in a constant environment where they're constantly stuck, if they can't get out of it at the moment?
Mm. Yeah, I would suggest, even if you're confined to that environment, to do something different, like when I was living in a just really, really despicable environment, like riddled with just bed bugs and alcohol and cigarette smokes 24/7, I just had to do something different, whether it's go out for a walk, go to the park, do something different. And that's something that I never done. I'm not a person to go on walks or to go out, go to the park and just sit there and think. I'm never a person to do that. But attempting to try something different, or just attempting to do anything to try to alleviate the situation can be very constructive. Not because it will help, but it could be an opportunity for the creator to guide you, send you messages. And also, I don't know if that individual has asked for help, has thought about seeking help. Um, but
No, that's the problem. Like, I wouldn't know if he asked for help, but it's like you're constantly in a repetitive pattern where you're doing something in the same environment. And I mean, we did try to give him like, you know, therapy or whatever, but they kind of like disregarded that. So he's not getting it.
and also the biggest thing I would say to understand immediately for all those who have chosen to join this to join this fight is that we cannot help anyone who does not have the true will and want to help themselves, because we will often spend a lot of time, no, not my bad, we will often waste a lot of time thinking we're trying to help people who actually don't care to change, who are comfortable in their situation, who are comfortable in their patterns, because that's what trauma does to us. It makes us comfortable being traumatized. So I should have said that first. Make sure that person is actually wanting to help themselves, or else we will waste a lot of time on victims instead of being able to help those who actually are wanting to help, wanting to change their patterns of behavior, and those behaviors being thought, speech, and action. Um, I hope that someone answers the questions. Everyone else, Miss Williams, Mr. Edwards, everyone else can also chime in to help to answer the question.
But it's important to have a language to be able to articulate to that person. Even if the person is not asking for help, ask the person if they need help, because help is a process. I mean, like the gentleman said, you'll waste a lot of time trying to help somebody who doesn't want it, who may even see the help that you're providing as harm, not help. So it's important to have the language. Also, it's important to show the person how to get out of those patterns by demonstrating it yourself. Don't just tell them to, get out of the environment, or don't hang around these people, or, because they'll hang around those people just because you said don't hang around them. But actually show that person, take them somewhere, develop some kind of hobby with the person, and show them how that can be enjoyable. So it's important to do both.
Thank you, guys. I wanted to make a comment as Trey Sean was saying that, when Miss Gurns fell, as well as Miss Gurns got punched in the face but I don't know if you remember Dominisha. Got punched in the face by Dominisha's mom when Dominisha was fighting a girl. So she used to come to work with a busted lip for trying to interfere into a fight. Of course, Dominisha didn't get kicked out, but um, I guess that refrained her from um, taking the approach that she was taking with the students.
I do remember the student you mentioned.
System of white supremacy.
And she still works there. So be informed.
Wait, Miss Gernstow is employed by Wallsford Elementary?
Yes. I think she teaches first or second. The last time I saw her a couple of years ago. She was still working there. She said she remembered me, so for sure, she'll definitely remember you.
Yeah, we may need to attempt to reach out and interview or discuss with her her racist attacks against Black students before she succumbs to her whiteness and dies. I oh, I want to mention the just the alarming rates that it seems to be the non-white children are given anti-psychotic drugs. I think that is very, very suspicious situation. Definitely can't be constructive to be giving 5-year-olds children whose brain is barely developing cannot be constructive to give these children these drugs. And I think it's definitely helping to maintain white supremacy because if these drugs are anything like some of the ones I've experienced, and not even just that, the psychiatrist even mentions how the symptoms could be almost like zombifying the kids, like taking away a child's ability to imagine, taking away a child's ability to want to explore the world and want to learn about the world at such a young age creates, from my observation, a person who is destined to be find themselves in greater confinement or find themselves reaching out to poison, to drugs in order to deal with their future problems or just to deal with their daily life because they haven't experienced a true childhood. They haven't whatever portion of the brain that needs to develop correctly has not developed correctly. Therefore, I don't imagine them having that much of a constructive life, being placed on antipsychotic at such a young age. And just what the psychologist mentions about just losing a child with no imagination is very, very tragic. Just to what it means, what it represents. Because from remembering my childhood, exploring, like my curiosity led me to explore, and that was very fulfilling for me. That has I attribute that to a lot of my creativity and my ability to imagine a world with justice, my ability to understand that creating justice is probably not a that hard of a task. It just requires a lot of non-white people to do it. But if children aren't given opportunity to develop normally due to the system of white supremacy, that things are really, really, really not looking constructively for non-white people, because we need the generation under us to also help solve the problem if we're unable to do it. But if a large majority of them are on antipsychotics and all these drugs, then that's going to be a hard thing to accomplish. And that concludes my notes. I'll give space for other folks to comment on.
I have a friend that her son was diagnosed with ADHD, but her son teacher, she lives in the valley, and he goes to like it's majority of white children, but there's other children that are non-white that goes there. And the teacher is a white lady, but she was really trying to get him on a dosage of drugs. She wanted him to be prescribed. She wanted him to go see his doctor to prescribe him anything because she felt like he didn't know how to act and, behavioral issues. And my friend really just didn't want to put her son on drugs. She don't believe in drugs. They don't take drugs. They don't even take any kind of form of drugs for pain. So it was just to the point how eager this white woman was constantly harassing her to put her son on any kind of form of a drug. And the doctor told her, it's no point of you bringing your son here because the only thing I can prescribe him is a drug. And if he doesn't need it, then there's nothing else I can do. So she got lost and stuck. So she's kind of hopeless right now because her son still has these behavioral issues. Of course, he doesn't have that teacher anymore, but she's kind of lost on what she needs to do because of the lack of the father he wants is as not there as much as he wants him to be there.
Yeah, I'm just reminded of the code again, which is a large portion of the code is compensation, compensating. Ask for what should be given and compensate for what's not. And if that victim unit had may perhaps had an understanding that the the victim's father is not there for due to a highly sophisticated system called white supremacy that was designed much before either of them were born to get that victim father out of the home, then perhaps they would have a much better time in dealing with what they're dealing with, and they would know to compensate instead of to just compensate. Um, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, great meeting. I don't really have much else to say besides it was nice sharing my experiences, and I look forward to next week.
Yeah, that being said, we definitely can get into our closing remarks, closing comments. Um, I'll just start with mine. Um, again, this is not easy topic, easy subject, but I believe it to be of constructive value. I know we will learn a lot from each other and from this text. So I commend all of you for being here and being able to talk about what we're talking about and to use this information to produce justice and share this information with victims of white supremacy. Much before I understood white supremacy, before I even had that word in my vocabulary, I told myself that I'm going to dedicate my life to mending the minds and trauma of Black people. And it's nice to see other folks who seem to have taken that same path, even if it takes the form of producing justice. So that's all for me.
I too appreciate the teaching and the expressions we've all shared. I think what it actually helps us to understand too is that you're not alone in your trauma. There is someone else who has trauma too. Some who have it, who can't even talk about it today, but yet it's there. But one thing I have found out is that if you don't talk about it, it stays hidden within you. But if you open up and you share it, it's a possibility somebody can use what you say to help them to realize I've experienced it too, but I was too ashamed or I was too embarrassed to talk about it. But we have to learn that our problems are not uncommon. They're just not uncommon. There is more tragedies we haven't even heard about, but yet our people have experienced it as non-white people throughout the planet. So we just have to realize we must do everything we can to produce justice, guaranteeing that no one, no matter what color they are being mistreated. And that everyone, including white people who need help the most, gets the most constructive help. That must be our goal, because if not, this only continues. And these horror stories, which are war stories, it will only continue. And it's to the point of we ought to be tired of the war stories. We ought to be tired of them, but yet we still have them because this system yet remains. So I encourage you to produce justice the way you can do it and help other people to be more involved into producing justice. And hopefully soon we will have the justice where we have a system that is concerned about all people, not just some people, but all people, no matter their color. Thanks.
Thank you, Miss.
I wanted to say that even though I was late, just hearing y'all stories and experience and to understand the concept of part two made me realize that trauma runs deeper than we expect it to run. And it's not an overnight thing that we can solve. But once people get to the root of their trauma and the system of fixing the issue, then we can all come to a situation where things will get better for not just us, but as our children and our elders. But I like to hear more of the book because it just puts you in concept to think about your own situation.
Thank you, everyone. Definitely looking forward to next week, where we'll be picking back up on chapter 3 and just sharing more constructive information. So thanks again, everyone. I commend all of you for just your bravery and discussing this topic. And it's gonna adjourn there.